I don't think you can transcend racism so long as you cling on to and try to rehabilitate the fundamentally hierarchical and biased categories of race. I don't think you can have your cake and eat it too that way. And I realize that's a huge ask, and it's oftentimes thought of as naive to even suggest, but I just think that we have to actually take serious, Frantz Fanon's injunction to imagine forth a new man. We have to think in new categories. We've inherited abstract color categories from the collision of Europe and Africa and the New World through the slave trade, through the fundamental economic oppression and exploitation of slavery. Black in America and in much of the colonized world was always for hundreds of years synonymous with unfree. White was synonymous with free. You can capitalize the B if you want to. You can make white people always live with a lowercase w. That's not going to fundamentally change the implicit hierarchy. In fact, I think it reinforces it because everybody knows what the lowercase means and why you have to give the capital. So I think that these are fundamentally flawed categories, and it took me, I didn't grow up thinking that way. I grew up with a white Anglo-Saxon Protestant mother and a Black American father from Texas who's a descendant of slaves. And in the 80s and 90s, where I grew up, it was still very much the American way to say a drop of black blood makes a person black. That's the end of the conversation. It wasn't even until I was 19 years old in the year 2000 that you could select more than one box on the census. So I didn't even think of myself as biracial. I was just black. I had a white mom. Black kids thought that was normal enough, and white kids didn't think I was white. It was only when I was 29 and I moved to Paris, and I'll cut this short, but I married a woman who, it occurred to me, had blonde hair and blue eyes as my mother did. And for the first moment, I started to wonder if the kind of, the assumption that a drop of black blood makes a person black might be tested in my child. And when I held her in the hospital and I was confronted with the fiction of race physically for the first time in a way that I wasn't even with myself, it fell apart for me right there. And I didn't think, here I am with a white child. I thought, how can this child who's 25% Senegambian, according to 23andMe, be white? And how can I be so simplistically described as black if I can produce a child like this? And so the categories fell apart for me, and I started to question whether they work for anybody else.